As of this morning, we had another horrible day in terms of the number who have died as a result of coronavirus. If we take a look at the numbers, yesterday was not quite as bad, slightly short of the all-time high of nearly 2,000, but still very high. And those 2 days are just such a one-two punch of a significant number of people dying, or at least that's what the professionals who report this stuff want us to believe. Others, in a position of authority in terms of media or even power in politics, don't necessarily feel the same way. Here is what Donald Trump has been saying about the numbers who have died, and more importantly, what he wants you to think about the numbers that might die.
That was a projection of, I guess, 1.5 to 2.2 million people would die if we didn't close it up. That's a lot of people. So if we do a number that's tremendously smaller than that, now if we did close it up, the numbers got to 100 to 220 million people. So if we can stay substantially under the 100, which was the original projection, I think we all did a very good job, even though it's a lot of people.
Okay, so what we have there is him saying, and I think Mehdi Hassan pointed out that they always want to anchor you to that original projection, not to cause you to take this seriously and be willing to perhaps sacrifice some personal mobility and all that in the near future, but to say that if literally anything other than that happens, we'll have done a great job. And he's not just implying that, he's directly saying that over and over. And so they're now saying it might be something like 60,000, and they're already pitching that as some sort of great victory, which I find to be ominous, honestly, Michael.
Yeah, well, the insurance to that would have been the notion that you had Fauci and the doctors out there saying these things, these numbers, confirming these numbers, forecasting them. You had the medical community sort of saying that these are numbers that we're forecasting. So you knew that anything that came in under those numbers was going to be a Trump victory dance. So I'm not surprised we're going to get that. The question is anybody going to be looking at the way this White House handled this with anything but scorn once this is all said and done? Not necessarily because of, you know, that they were responsible for every death, but the lack of preparedness and the not getting the straight talk, and then having the medical community challenge them every day. And then you look at his poll numbers. Even when they bumped, they didn't bump very much. The president, and I think we might have talked about this last time, a U.S. president in a time of crisis should see his numbers go through the roof. They have for terrible presidents and terrible situations, and they didn't go through the roof here. They always come back to earth, but they didn't go through the roof here. So I do think that you have people looking at this with a great deal of skepticism, even though we know what the president's doing here.
Exactly. And, you know, he's going to get an assist, which we're going to go through a number of different media figures who are attempting in one way or another, and the tactics do vary, to prep people to not be that concerned, even if the number does continue to significantly rise. But as someone pointed out in the chat, I do want to at least acknowledge that he's talking about original projections there, and he's referring to some of the original models, which are obviously going to be somewhat loose. But let's also bear in mind a projection that he made not too many weeks ago when he said the number of cases is only 15 and soon it'll be close to 0. Bear in mind the number of cases wasn't 15 when he said that, it was something like 60 to 70, but he projected we'd be at 0 a month ago. So the projections have changed fast.
It was going to wash through.
It was going to wash through. Just everyone be calm. It'll go away. It'll go away. Much like a bear that is mauling us right now. Right. So look, it's not just Trump. He's going to say what he's going to say. But Fox News especially, you know, they have in one form or another been doing everything they can to hamper the ability of our country to deal with coronavirus from the very beginning. Right now, what they're doing is a 1-2 punch of implying that agreeing with Trump that anything short of 100,000 or 1 million deaths is going to be some sort of big victory, but especially don't even trust the numbers that you're seeing. And, you know, we've been tracking this a couple times now. It started off with Diamond and Silk last week saying the numbers are just made up. They're just making up fake numbers. And that was just Fox Nation. You know, that was only the online component of the biggest media company in the country. So we shouldn't be too concerned about that. But then it rapidly spread over the past few days to, you know, to Brit Hume and others. And now, in fact, it's hit the straight news anchors. Take a look at Harris Faulkner here.
The federal government now is classifying all COVID-19 patient deaths as such, regardless of whether any other underlying health issues were a factor. This as the death toll in the United States just topped 13,000. How many of those people had other health risks at play, though? And maybe it wasn't, in fact, COVID-19 that caused their death.
Okay, so she's saying if they're sick with literally anything else and they die, it's being tracked as being caused by coronavirus because that's what killed them. But that bothers her because these people had underlying illnesses. Why is that being counted? Even though this is like some sort of like big realization that they've had in the past 48 hours that it's combining with other illnesses to kill people. We've known about that from the very beginning. That's not something that means we should ignore coronavirus. That's one of the reasons we've been as scared as we've been about it, because it preys on people who are susceptible to illness. Not only them, there are plenty of totally healthy young people who are getting sick and even dying as a result of this, but especially those with compromised immune systems or something else at play. They now think that if somebody with a compromised immune system catches coronavirus, dies of it, that for some reason that shouldn't be counted as a coronavirus death. I have no idea how you come to that conclusion. And again, this is not Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity. That's Harris Faulkner. She's supposed to be one of their news people, right, Michael?
Well, that's where I was going to say that what she said is as egregious as what you calling her a straight news anchor. She's someone who does drop in opinion there with some constancy. And sorry for the background noise here, but I think that that what you're seeing though is exactly what the problem with this. If all of a sudden there was something that was afflicting only the weakest among us, and it was a disease, and it was killing people who otherwise would not be dying. Maybe their life expectancy wasn't what yours is or mine is necessarily, but it wasn't. They weren't about to imminent away. Then that's a national and worldwide emergency, and that's what we're dealing with now.
Exactly. And as we were saying yesterday when this stuff was starting to go around, does anyone think that they would be like tying themselves into mental knots to excuse away these deaths if it wasn't Donald Trump or another Republican president that was in office? Whether it's their opinion people or their straight news people or straight news adjacent people, what passes for straight news on Fox News, does anyone actually think that they would be doing that? And we predicted, by the way, that this would become sort of the universal go-to position. And it in fact has, I would say faster than I would have expected, spread throughout the network and other affiliated, the online right-wingers, the right-wing writers and things like that. And I understand that Harris Faulkner probably feels like, I'm just looking at this critically, and I want to make sure that we have the most accurate information possible. Maybe that's what she's doing. But the end result of a person waking up and turning on Fox News and going through a full day of it is that they will be left with the impression that you can't trust these numbers. And so if it hits 20,000, if it hits 50,000, I mean, really, what does that even represent? Does that mean anything? And they will not think that it means anything. And so Trump, he can be a buffoon and he can bungle this thing. Maybe it'll hurt him a little bit with some slightly more critical thinking independence. I don't know. But in terms of his base, they're going to believe that it's nothing really.
Yeah, that's true. And his base, though, is the one that are the ones that this is all being addressed to. This is get out the vote in a way, right? This is to make sure that, because they know how fragile their position is as a candidacy, how by what a slim margin electorally and state-wise within the states, really popular vote within the states that they won by. They have to make sure that they get and keep every single Donald Trump voter. So they keep doing this because it's an us versus them, and we're in the us versus them era, anyway in an election year. But it's certainly in a much more pronounced way now.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.